All right, we should give it a minute or two. Let people join.
Okay, sure. Are we live now? People can see us.
We are.
I shouldn't take my shirt. I'll keep my clothes on.
Correct. Yeah. Or just don't stand up. I know you don't have bottoms on, so.
Don't want to shock the viewing public.
Yeah, no, we had a lot of people that expressed interest in this, so that's pretty cool.
Well, I mean, if you lock everyone down, at home with nothing else to do,
that's true.
Then suddenly it's much more appealing. You know,
you're a big draw.
I don't have to compete with like nice weather or the option to go to the pub. So really
that's true. Where are you right now?
London, North London.
Cool. All right, we'll give it one more minute and then I'll just go right to it. Sure. So I have like a list of questions that people had submitted via email, via different channels or whatever, and I'll try to go in like a logical chronology here because some of them are related and whatnot, but it's going to be a little helter skelter. So
no, I'm open to anything, Mike.
Okay. All right. So, okay. All right. We can get started. Everybody, welcome Sam Grafton. This is one of our elite calls. Obviously, you know Sam. He's been a long-time pro of Run It Once. Made probably over 100 videos at this point. But we love Sam, and we know that he is knowledgeable not just about poker, but on a lot of things. And we thought he would be a great guest for this little talk. And so I'm just going to jump right into the questions. Like I said, there is sort of a chronology that I would like to stick to, but some of them are going to be a little bit scattershot. So.
And I'm looking at this chat on the site. That's where people could type stuff if anyone wants.
Yeah. So if you have a question at any point during this event, you can type it in the Q&A section, and we'll get to those as well. And sure. But we also have questions that people submitted beforehand, so we'll definitely try to get to all of them before we call it quits. Okay, so. First one, how did you get started in poker, and did you have hopes of making a career of it early on, or did you just sort of fall into that, and is that what happened?
Yeah, I, like a lot of people, I fell into it. I think when I first started playing poker, I couldn't even really conceive of a professional poker player. I started playing, unlike a lot of people, my trajectory was a little different in that I came to poker at the age of like 28. I learned the rules at like 27. Something like that, and started to play for not seriously like I was trying to become a pro, but seriously like, I was an enthusiast of the game at about 28. And actually I have a very distinct memory of we used to go, once we started to get good, we played our little local game in a snooker hall, and we went to a casino in Birmingham, which was the nearest casinos in Coventry and Birmingham. And someone said about a certain guy, like that he was a pro, that he did it for a living, and me kind of observing him and thinking, wow, like what does a professional poker player look like? I'll say briefly about starting off, because I've told this story many times, but I sort of essentially I moved back to my hometown after finishing my master's, and I was abroad, and I used to work with adults with learning disabilities. That's what I'd done to save money for. I'd done that job several times, so I took that job again, and I used to finish about 4 p.m. It's quite a draining job, but there was no paperwork afterwards. I was a care worker, and my brothers, there wasn't much. My hometown, having had these exciting times abroad and away, was a little bit boring. I was a bit older. My friends had settled down a bit. My brothers were playing poker in a snooker hall, and I started going to the game on a Sunday. And they were already quite good, just because they were thinking guys and they were enthusiasts. And we were playing with sort of gamblers. It was like £10 rebuy. People were just, it was no amount of money to the builders we were playing with, and cab drivers we were playing with, but we were trying to win. And also I was bust though, so I used to go with my like £20 and just play tight, which was probably a really good strategy. Not that I knew it, and so I played that, and I became sort of then the game was on Wednesday and Sunday, so I used to go to that, and then we used to travel to another pub in another town and play this pub game on a Monday, and sort of doing a little circuit within our little area. And then when I moved down to London, there was a poker club here, And I used to work at my aunt owns a nightclub, and I'd do a shift at my aunt's club, and I'd get paid £80. I'd take the £80 and I'd go and play 1-1, and I'd try and like double or treble the £80. And that was my way in. And by the time I was playing for the £80, I was a teaching assistant, and I had 2 bars. And like, if I lost that £80 that week, I'm not going out on a date, or I'm not being able to do it. So
yeah,
I
mattered.
I had to win. Yeah. And it went from there. I mean, I could talk more about it if people want to know.
What did you play?
I played 1-1. So we played these £10 rebuys, and then eventually we'd go and sometimes play at this Birmingham casino. It was like a £30 freeze out or something on a Tuesday.
Okay.
And then when I went to the club, there was 1-1 pot limit hold'em, which again, I was playing some real tight strategy, which now if you had a solver, everyone's opening 5-7 suited under the gun.
Right,
I'm just like, got £100. It's going cool. I'm like, pot, like trying to get my aces in. And there's some guy trying to crack me every time with 8-9 suited, you can imagine. And I started to win consistently. And then the bigger game was a 1-2, and I started to take shots at that. And when I stopped, I started doing an internship. Didn't want to be I was a teaching assistant, and I barely made ends meet because I got that job through an agency. So when there was a holiday, I didn't get paid in the holiday. So if there was a week holiday, that month I got 3 weeks money. I was paying rent in a house share in Tottenham. I mean, I was completely napo. So I needed to do something else. So I took an internship at NGO that campaigned on environmental issues on trade and environmental issues. And I needed to pay rent while I was doing it. And I was like, I'd had this feeling I'd almost never lost playing this 1-1, or, sometimes I get sucked out on, and I'd be like,
yeah.
And I thought, probably naively, like, don't play 1-1 for a living. That's not a good idea. But naively, I thought I could play 4 nights a week or 5 nights a week and do this. So it was in South London. I'd finish my job at 5, get the train directly to the club and play till the last tube stop at 12:30. And like a lot of people early in poker, that sounds like, wow, you're doing a really long day. But I mean, I loved it. I mean, I was buzzing. I was ringing my boys back home, ringing my brother, telling him about the hands I played. And, it was in the, and I just started to win all the time. And when the internship finished, I carried on playing, basically.
Cool. So that, just reading through all the questions, that leads us into like 4 or 5 of the questions that people ask. So you're older than a lot of the young guns that got, the young guns now.
Sporting a gray beard.
That are now old. Yeah, me too, a little bit. But so a lot of the people got their start playing exclusively online poker.
Sure.
And so you don't really seem to be a part of that group. But you also don't seem, at least to me, to be a part of the older guard that, had been playing since, the early 90s and the Mayfair Club and all that nonsense. So I guess the question is, how have you managed to keep pace with the internet whiz kids that got started playing online and people like Galfond and Tom and those types of guys? And then do you think that you'll keep this up, or do you think that the new crop of players seem to be getting better at a pace that will eventually be hard to keep up with?
Yeah, so there's a couple of things. So there's been a double career. I think for a lot of people feel this. First, the era before solvers and the era after solvers. So the era before solvers, I mean, I guess I had an aptitude towards poker like a lot of people. There was something, I wouldn't say natural ability, but, I'd studied very hard at a lot of things, right? I'd done a master's, I'd done an undergrad degree. I was kind of, the cerebral side of poker appealed to me, right? So, and I always wanted to listen to people. I was always, I guess, reasonably humble. And even in my little world, when an older pro would say something, hey, and so I started playing online, had success. And then I fell in with, there was a big crew of very good UK poker players then. Craig McCorkle, Jake Cody, Mormon, Brammer. We all traveled together. It's a very sociable scene in UK. If you turn up at a couple of tournaments, you start to have beers and everyone's very open with knowledge back. I remember Mormon just saying, I don't see bet like queen high boards when they call because they've always got king queen. Like, but that back in the day, we 3-bet everything and just play king queen, which actually turns out to be quite a good strategy. And I was like, wow, blown away. And I used to, instead, you used to c-bet everything. And you just started to pick up little tricks and whatnot. Yeah. And I did quite well through that era. I mean, certainly pre Black Friday, I only had like a year and a half of that. But that year I made so much. So, I mean, I had an F-top score very early in my career, which was a big bankroll boost, and went to Vegas, et cetera, et cetera. And then, and also I would say I had a work ethic. Like I never was frivolous with my money after I made, just because I'd come from a background where I'd never had money. And also I'd had to work really hard in other jobs, like real world jobs, inverted commas. I don't necessarily like that phrase, but it'll do for the moment. And
so you weren't prone to punting off your money.
Well, and also I was happy to grind. I played 4 or 5, didn't just get a score and take 3 months off. I continued to play. And then when the solvers came along, I've always had I mean, I did my master's in critical theory, which is like sort of Marxist thought, neo-Marxist thought. And I'm happy to think about things in a broader scale. So when game theory, I wasn't an innovator within game theory, but I was a lot of people had a lot of resistance of like, oh, I'm going to do my own thing. These guys, I was immediately straight open to that. And that, I was one of the first people to have Pio and start really delving into that world, which gave me a little bit of a head start. As far as going forward goes, of course, it's a tough, it's tough for anyone, particularly at my age where, even for the last 10 years, I always wanted to have other interests and do other things, not just sort of lock myself in Solver jail. So, I mean, I feel like at the moment I manage playing the super high rollers last year, I think was a big, those guys are working so hard that hang on to their coattails, or even obviously I'm trying to close the gap to catch up with the best players. That was quite intimidating. And I worked very, very hard that year, which actually put me in good stead for this year when there's been lockdown and a lot of volume to put in. But it is tough. I mean, it's tough for everyone making it now. But as I said, the work ethic, you have to love the work. You have to love the game. You have to love improving. And I think I have that. Please cut me short if I give too long answers, by the way.
Nope, not at all. I will. So it's funny because like I'm looking at the questions and at the end of every one of your questions is perfect setup for the next one.
There you go.
So it works well. So a bunch of years ago, I remember talking with Phil about whether it was more profitable for him to play something like 8 to 12 tables of 1020 PLO, or if he should play, 2 or even 3 tables of like 200, 400 PLO, things like that. And so I wonder, I guess this is kind of particularly about the super high rollers versus, some of the more regular stakes. So for guys like Ike and Timothy and those types of people, it's always going to be profitable for them to just play the highest stakes possible. Sure. But where do you think your sweet spot is in terms of games and stakes? And kind of like you were just saying, that it's going to be harder and harder to keep up with some of the people that are just grinding very hard, learning the game. But do you think the super high rollers will continue to be profitable for you, or do you see maybe both in terms of your desire to play and your I guess the ease of peace of mind that it would give you playing something like a 500 or a 1K versus getting all in on the 75K?
I definitely have a good. I definitely haven't. One thing that can happen when you play super high stakes is you can find online grind, anything lower, very dull and very boring. And sometimes you even see the best players play not so great in the main events because it's suddenly become mundane for them. That definitely hasn't happened for me. I enjoyed that period because the time between super high rollers, I didn't put in much volume online and I was studying really, really hard. And after you play a tournament that big, I was looking at every spot I played. And I was seeing hands that I wasn't even in, where Seth or Makita would do something. And I would be like, oh, I would never have known there was like a donk shove all in on the river here. Or I would never have had a 4X pot. Or I would never have like half potted this spot. Like, and me and some of my closer friends who were, we'd look at those spots. So that was really great. And of course that feeds back in. You should feel, when you're playing the highest stakes, I mean, people's response to me was also very different. I'd go from, you know, I'd play the 50K in Prague, and then when I went and sat in a 2K, suddenly there was a bit of a fear factor. And,
yeah,
you know, I
sure.
think, and you felt really good about yourself. You were like, I've just been at this table. Now I'm at this table. I should feel very confident. And over the last few years, I have been very confident in my game. So they shouldn't be completely distinct from each other. I would imagine right now that when the super high rollers come back, I mean, I was going to play my first 250K. You know, I was really in that scene in Sochi. And then with coronavirus just beginning, it wasn't so much that basically I'm on the periphery of the scene, and there was a feeling that it wasn't going to be very good because less people were going to travel, certain VIPs were going to travel, and it was going to become a bit of a problem to sell. So I didn't go to that stuff. So I was moving in that direction. I feel like right now, I feel like I probably won't seek that out again, but the best 50Ks, the best 100Ks, the WSOP ones, the ones that in Rozhadov, I would like to think that I can, at least for a while longer, feel good enough about my game that people want to invest in me. You know, it's a pretty ruthless market. There's no friend. If you fall out, if I fall out of the elite category, I'll know about it pretty quick. Like no one will buy the action, and that might be fine. I might be like, you know, and I know the work I need to do to stay on top of it in order to want to invest my 10K into the 100K or whatever. Like I've got to feel like I'm winning on my piece as well in order to want to do it. So
that's true. Yeah.
So, you know, that market will speak for it, will have its effect anyway. You know, we're yet to see what it's going to be like. I've been quite happy playing online. One thing I did do is during this period, I played I did, in terms of the initial, what you're talking about with Phil, I've played 9 tables of 1Ks.
And what did you think about that?
I've skipped the 25Ks. Well, it might be a little bit biased, but I just had a lot of success in like, I mean, I won a 500 for 240K. I got second in a 5K for 360. I got third in a 5K for 100K. Like, and when I play a 25K, because I sell a huge chunk, let alone if I were to have played the 100Ks and 50Ks, I feel like I got to be two-tabling. I feel like I got to be super focused.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
And I can't play the other things. And I felt like during this period, like normally it's like, you're going to wait. I'm going to make way more money playing a 25K in Prague with the markup I can charge than an online session here. Right now, I just felt like there was so much good stuff. Again, it's calibration everyone needs to make for themselves, but that was how I felt. And also online, I was kind of looking at fields, and you had the best live players come back, and you had the best online players, and it was they weren't, I'm sure they've been fine, but they didn't look as amazing to me. I was just a little bit more risk averse over this period. Again, as I say, it's something you try and navigate for yourself. It could be that I've made a big mistake not playing bigger over this period, because I have had a good results, and like some people have made a lot of money. It could be that last year I was making a mistake and I should have been doing this, and I was playing for small ROIs in, you know, even calculating how much you're winning, whether you're a top reg, a mid-tier reg, or a small loser in the super high rollers is very difficult. And I could have been making a mistake, but I felt like I was good enough to compete.
That's good to hear. You mentioned it a little bit before, but what is the live poker scene like in the UK? And is it possible to, I mean, you mentioned that you knew of a pro early on, but, you know, is it possible to make a living grinding, you know, take COVID out of the equation, at least for now? Is it possible to make a living grinding the live games in and around the UK?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure that there was a spot like 8 years ago where probably playing live cash in London, there's like a few poker players who I'm loosely friends with who made heaps doing that, and it was probably a mistake to be loving tournaments online and looking at my Pocket Fives ranking. I could have been sitting at the Vic playing 5-10 against like huge whales, like, and that was probably, I mean, I've, you know, but live poker in general, I mean, I love, you know, I still go and play GUKPTs, you know. I played a £400 tournament last year, like in East London, main event, because I'm quite happy to go and play. I really like being around, you know, I love the guys who played at EPTs and my friends there. I love just sitting with like ordinary. One of the nice things about poker, it doesn't feel like work to me, right? Like I don't mind to go play a 1K, or I've never lost that enjoyment. and that social side of things. And normally I meet someone new, there's people I like there and I go for dinner with afterwards. And in general, it's great. Like it's something I continue to enjoy. I think just playing live now, I mean, it's the flip side of that is it has hurt some people. Like my friends who were like not as good at poker, but seeking out soft games, you know, now there's only online. It's quite hard, you know, like you never know what's going to be the best thing. Like, as I said, a few years ago, there was people being much more sharp than me, just searching for good games and soft spots to make money. And I was battling with the best and trying to compete. And maybe that was a bit dumb, but now having that skill set, when there's all this money online, being able to reg 5K, a 5K turbo, feel confident you're winning with some overlay from weaker players is a great spot to be in. So one thing, just to sort of summarize like a nugget, I think always getting better at poker, investing in your skill set is a really good thing to do. You'll never know when being really good at PLO, being really good at mixed game, studying your ass off to be good at tournaments, that spots will emerge that are just prints. Like the PSPC suddenly comes up in Bahamas. Suddenly you could sell a huge markup for a 25K if you're a good tournament player and you've just got a print spot. Suddenly COVID happens and we all, you know, make a bunch of money, whatever it might be. I still take a bit of cash game coaching and stay sharp there because, you know, one day I might get invited to a TV cash game or have a spot where just being sharp enough to sit in this game and not lose too much to the best player is going to prove dividends. And I think it's always smart to like reinvest in your own skill set.
No, I agree wholeheartedly. Okay, so you've try to go off the poker a little bit. You've bounced around throughout the EU, at least from what I remember when we last chatted. You had stops in Poland, Prague, I think.
Yep.
And obviously Romania from your accent. And what's your favorite place? And do you foresee yourself settling in one spot? And as a follow-up, has Brexit put a damper on your wanderlust or your globetrotting?
I mean, Brexit's obviously, from my political perspective, like a bit of a disgrace. I mean, I actually remember I was at
a wedding. A lot of questions coming up about that. So.
I was at a wedding in
Poland.
So
don't blow it yet.
I was at a wedding in Poland the day of the result and having to explain it to people. And yeah, it's a great shame. I mean, in terms of, you know, being brutal from a political perspective, borders and these kind of, you know, the shutting down of free movement is only going to work one way, basically, in the end, when the bureaucracy sorted out. As a rich, white, British person, you have enormous privilege. The way borders function across the globe, from my political perspective, is to stop the movement of the less well-off, the less fortunate. If I want to go to, you know, if you're, you know, a Nigerian woman who's gambles for a living, the borders are there to stop you coming to the England, and we will do our best to keep you out because it's a racist system. If I want to go to Nigeria, it's super easy, and it will be super easy for me to go to Poland. It will be super easy for me to go to Prague. It will be done to make life harder for refugees, to make life harder for the less well-off of Europe, and that's why the system is, to my mind, disgraceful. So, you know, that's that. In terms of like my time abroad, I mean, it's something that I think if you can use your freedom as a poker player that we have, when you go to live stops, see a bit, tag on a few days and see that country, see that city. If you can have, you know, I took the GPL because it would give me a month in Malta. I moved to Prague with my girlfriend. I moved to Warsaw when I had a Polish girlfriend. To be honest, there's a good chance I'll move to Brazil in the new year, you know, for a while and at least and see Brazil. Like, opportunities to travel, opportunities to immerse yourself in other cultures is a huge boon in your life, and you should seek it out whenever you can, I think. And yeah, I'm very, very grateful. I'm very, very grateful as well, by the way, to the Czech poker players who, you know, I met. And when people heard I was in Prague, when I played poker live, there was an EPT like a month after I arrived, I met, and people were like, well, give me a ring and have a beer. Same to a lesser extent in Poland. Unfortunately, in Poland, there isn't live poker, so it's a little bit harder. But, you know, every poker community, when I lived in Vienna for a short time, I went to Vancouver, people have always been exceptionally generous to me. And I think also if you can reciprocate that, it's really good, because actually there's a few cases where people I only knew a bit. Like I remember when Griffin, I didn't know Griffin very well, and he came to London. He just reached out to me, was like, I'm in London. I took him out, showed him my little part of London and introduced my friends. And then it ended up being a great friendship, and we met further. And whenever you can reach out to someone and be generous with your local knowledge, people really appreciate it, and you get it back 100-fold, I think.
Like that. I agree. So, so I think when we last met in person, I don't know if it was Vegas but I think it was Prague. And I guess me and my friend Henry both found you wildly knowledgeable about politics in your country and elsewhere. And so just looking for your general take on the UK and USA, and where do you see it going, say 25 years from now?
Wow, 25 years. I mean, 25 years, one of the biggest things will be like climate catastrophe. At the moment, you know, we don't have governments who are prioritizing that. And if not even, it doesn't even have to be worst case scenario. If, you know, just the scientific consensus of what the fallout is going to be with our current levels of consumption, it's very, 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 very troubling. And as with anything, it will be the poorest and most vulnerable who are going to be worst hit by that. So that's super, super scary. Like everyone, I was pleased to see Trump ousted and Biden installed as US president. But, you know, at the same time, this is not a radical government. This isn't someone who, I mean, if he was up against, you know, any kind of reasonable candidate, you wouldn't be supporting. This is someone who doesn't have a track record of supporting you know, the least well off, who doesn't have a great track record in US foreign policy. And you know, it's a scary prospect in the world right now. Talking about other countries I've been to, Poland right now just tried to pass one of the most like comprehensive bans on abortion of anywhere in the EU. And there was amazing protests by Polish women to resist that recently. You know, there's a authoritarian government in power in Poland who are eroding human rights in a very, very considerable way. So it's definitely a scary thing. I mean, I don't see myself as an authority in politics particularly, but I do try and be, you know, I do very much care about the political and you know, I still travel to Palestine quite often and see friends and comrades there who are struggling against occupation, which, you know, is maintained through US subsidy. And yeah, like I have a lot of activist friends. You know, prior to being a poker player, I was, you know, as I think it's reasonable for me to say, like an activist, and I've been I was engaged in politics in a very real way for a long time, and that pertains to some extent. You know, now sometimes it's a bit more money rather than time that I can donate, but I do try and stay in contact with my with political topics and with political comrades.
For sure, I can tell. Okay, you have degrees in both literature and philosophy. What are a few books that you think everyone should read? And if that list is too long, what are some of the best books that you've read recently?
Yeah, so actually, I sometimes, sometimes when you're playing, you're playing really well and you're running good. And I have the same with reading, where I always read, and then sometimes it's a bit like a superpower, and I can just devour books. Actually, this last week I read like five books, just went through them like super quick. I read just I have here actually.
Yeah, get it.
I read this, which was brilliant, which was Say Nothing, which is about.
I saw that on your Instagram or Twitter. I can't remember.
Yeah, which is like 400. I read it in like a day. I mean, Irish politics I've always had some interest in, but this has got such momentum to it. Such a narrative nonfiction is a, you know, rather than reading sort of dry history, which can be feel like a bit of a chore. This has got the momentum of like a story. It begins with the absolutely, with an atrocity, really, with the abduction and disappearance of a Protestant woman in Ireland at the hands of the IRA, and she has 10 children and she's abducted, and he uses her disappearance and the mystery that surrounds it for a narrative of the Troubles, and a description of like a whole bunch of quite heroic but at times troubled people resisting British control over the north of Ireland. And yeah, it's a really, really great book, and it takes you through, you know, the horrific things the British government did, but also some of the really problematic things that the Republican movement partook of during that time, and what it is to be a freedom fighter, and the compromises you have to make along the way. And then, you know, the culmination is post the Good Friday Agreement and the ceasefire within Northern Ireland, the recovery, the finding of these bodies of these people that have been disappeared, and the hurt that brought to the family, and them seeking out justice. That was really, really good. So I read that. I finished a book today called Steal as Much as You Can, which is a really good book about the last 20 years and politics in England particularly, and the fallout from austerity and the crash of 2008. That was really good. I read a book also this week about the Bulger killings, the killing of Jamie Bulger, who was a 2-year-old boy who was killed by 2 10-year-olds in the UK in 1992. So I was 12 at the time, so I remembered it very graphically. It was one of the most horrific crimes committed in my life. But these two kids were tried as adults. They were tried in adult court at the age of 10, which is also very problematic, and was condemned by the European court. So it's about their background, about Liverpool, about the police handling of it and the fallout from it, and that was really good. And as far as going back of books I'd really recommend people to read, the books I give away most often, I give a lot of people Homage to Catalonia, which is George Orwell's account of fighting in the Spanish Civil War. Obviously, a lot of people read 1984 and Animal Farm, and that's obviously great. But this is Orwell won and fought for the Republicans in the Spanish Civil War. The Spanish Civil War is a sort of historical moment that is of great fascination, always been fascinating to me. And he fought for the POUM, he fought for the anarchists, and he was shot in the neck as well. And hospitalized. And it's about the communist betrayal of the anarchists and the infighting on the left, which actually, you know, was one of the major reasons Franco ended up winning. And about political commitment. I think it's a really great work of nonfiction. And also John Berger's Ways of Seeing, which is quite simplistic, but is a book about understanding culture. It's quite famous. I guess at the time it was very innovative. He has like chapters which are just paintings and adverts, it's just pictorial. The essays literally pictures just juxtaposed, and you see the depiction of women, for instance, throughout time and throughout history and in advertising. And he describes how culture is produced, who it's produced for, how it circulates. And it was the first thing that made me think very deeply beyond like, do I like this work of art? Or, you know, you tend to say, when you watch you hear it a lot with TV shows, oh, I didn't like that main character, or, you know, oh, it wasn't for me, I couldn't empathize. It made me understand a bit about like, who is this art? What is artwork about beyond the obvious? Why would I like something? Why didn't I like? Is a director trying to convey to you? Who produces a work of art, and how does it circulate in society is also an important consideration. And what are the politics of representation, which obviously has become an important topic in like, people talk about this now on Twitter and a lot. But I think at the time Berger wrote that book was, you know, certainly popularizing those ideas was quite unusual. Go ahead.
I think right after you posted that tweet talking about that book, I think it was like somebody just above that wrote something about like they were trying to watch a soccer game from Northern Ireland, and they asked Alexa what channel it's on. And then Alexa said something like, unfortunately, the game is only available in the UK.
Yes.
And then said Amazon single-handedly reversing the Good Friday Agreement, or something to that effect.
Yeah, I saw that tweet too. Yeah, that's funny.
Okay. All right, let's jump into some of the people's questions that they that they submitted for you. Okay, one person in the chat. When you say you work hard, what does your study routine look like, and how do you ID weakness in your own game?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So like everyone, I think doing a little often is really the best way to do it. I think sometimes we have the temptation to say, right, Friday, that's my day off, and I'm going to sit and solve for 6 hours. I think it is quite demanding staring at a sim, like working through, solving a problem, redoing it with a slight change and seeing what the outputs. So I think doing a small amount each day is really good. I think that finding good study partner, as everyone says, is really, really good. Even just for passive studying, sometimes me and Ben, I'll want to watch a replay of a final, and I'll be like, listen, do you want to watch it together? And we pause, or we'll be watching it. Okay, let's run that solve on the side and look at the solve afterwards. That's a really nice thing to do. And actually, particularly when I was sort of, as I said, in terms of this two-part, the post-solver era, sometimes what I like to do is I'll run a solve, and then I'll screenshot bits and write my understanding of it. You do that in Evernote, and then I'll send that to someone. So they get a free bit of info, right? Like, it's really good for them. I've done this work, I've run this solve, I've written the conclusions, right? And then maybe I solve it again. If we change it to flutter straw, the aggression dampers here, I think this is because this and this. They get this nice little report. And then they feed back to you, and they're like, sometimes it's like, bro, you've made this mistake here, this is useless. Or sometimes, yeah, you say that, but I think it's because of this. Or sometimes they're like, oh, I also did so. And it's like, it's really nice. And obviously, if they don't reply to you, you can sort of not hassle them again in the future or whatever. But I think that's a really good way of doing things. I mean, even within Bit B, sometimes I've had like players, I mean, this is great. Now I'm in a position where this happens, say, hey, can I have a hand history of yours? I'll look through it. I'll run all the sims. It's sort of a quid pro quo. They want to see how I'm doing so well. And I say, yeah, sure. And in response, they prepare, relationships like that with better poker players, or relationships like that with friends, ideally, and people you're coming up with yourself. That's really, really good way to work. In terms of IDing weaknesses in my game, I think obviously a lot of sites now, you can't run HUDs, but I still play a lot of volume on PokerStars, and going back and checking that my worst opens are still profitable and how profitable they are, checking back through my database. As I said, going through hand histories and being unforgiving, showing your worst hands, showing your mistakes to your friends, I think is really, really important. And as I said, like giving a hand history to a player who wants to learn from you, having them flag up weaknesses, that's really useful.
Yeah, I guess two things that I thought of when you were saying that is somebody like Tyler Forster. Watching his videos, I always am amazed that he'll just get Queen Jack suited in the cutoff, and he'll say, "Oh, okay, so this makes me like $1.75 in this game because he has
Sure.
7 million hands, and he realizes that Queen Jack suited makes him whatever $2 or whatever it ends up being."
Yeah.
So it's pretty incredible that he knows, every hand by position, how much it makes him. So, okay, this hand, ace-3 suited on the button. This is good for $2.50, something like that.
Yeah, it's crazy to think about it like that. Yeah, absolutely.
And then the other thing that I liked that you said that we try to get a lot of our coaches, especially recently, that do work with solvers, is to interpret not just go through the sim and show the sim, obviously that does have some value, but to give their thoughts in actual words rather than computer code. So you get the PO sim and you obviously look at it, but then at the end, like you just said, you write your conclusions, which I think has such a bigger impact than just staring at the sim and diddling a few things.
Absolutely. I mean, that's definitely the difference between the best players and the mid-level player. You can't, back in the day when we were just trying to memorize sims, so okay, I'll try and do this. If you understand why you're betting something and why you're checking something, we can begin to make deviations, and that's where the exploits come from. Understanding what is the purpose of checking this hand, and also it's immediately applicable to other scenarios. If you can understand, right, on this ace high board, I'm checking back king queen because I want to keep in the dominated kings and queens, then immediately you understand when you get flattered in position that you want to bet Jack 10 to clear out King Jack and check Ace King to keeping. You could just, you understand that because you understood this here, you understand it there, you know?
Yeah. I like that. Okay. If poker disappeared tomorrow, what would you want to spend your time on? Both professionally and recreationally, I guess.
Yeah. So obviously, as we said, politics is a big passion. And I mean, what I was going to do this year, actually, it was my 40th birthday in September, and I was going to go, I started studying Arabic at the beginning of the year, and I was going to go, to the Middle East and really delve into Arabic and spend some time in the Middle East, which hasn't happened and probably won't happen for a bit. Psychoanalysis, I think, is there's a few topics which I don't know, I don't have a really deep foundation in, but I love to read about. One is architecture. I don't have I love to read books about buildings and have kind of some instincts about what kind of architecture I like. But the other one is psychoanalysis. And I think if I was going to go back and study, I think I would study psychiatry or psychoanalysis and maybe move into that world. That's something that I find really fascinating. And I think you can do a lot of good. And understanding psychoanalytic theory, I see it a lot, even sometimes with friends, like at the end of the World Series. It's funny how we have this big taboo now, like, oh, don't talk about bad beats, like you're bad. And, or also there's big taboo around negativity, which, yes, having negative people around you can be really bad. But this wanting to offload, wanting to speak, I actually feel like sometimes around the end of the World Series, there's like almost trauma. There's people who've come, and one way of trauma is the mismatch. You dream all year of this thing. Again, what does Daniel Dvoress and these guys say? Imagine, foresee imagine your success. You go to every tournament, I imagine myself winning, and then you get wrecked. You reset, you've lost all this money, you've eaten badly, you've not realized your goal. And people want to speak, and sometimes you have dinner and no one's really listening to each other. Everyone's just offloading. And being someone that listens, saying to your friend, hey, give me a call. When someone seems down, give me a call, moan away, go. It's free. The floor is free. Allowing someone to get off the most mundane, how does this guy win all the time and I can't win anything? Allowing them just to share that and say that. And obviously, this is a minor level of trauma. People have real... But by the way, also I'm even doing it. I'm dismissing it. I'm saying this isn't a real problem, right? Actually losing half your net worth, 3/4 of your net worth, taking or whatever it might be, it is a real thing, right? Like spending 2 months, not many people spend 2 months working really hard every day and with less money than they have. That is a real thing. But also people have other deeper problems. And again, having a sounding board, listening really and asking follow-up, it's a real useful thing that you can do with friends, a really valuable thing.
More.
Yeah.
I couldn't agree more. And I've said to people before that I think it's almost a hallmark of noticing how intelligent somebody is, where if they are responding to what you're saying versus waiting for you to stop speaking and then say what they were just going to say anyway.
Yes.
So it's a massive difference between the two things. Like you could just keep talking, and then I say what I was going to say anyway, or I hear what you say and then I change what I was going to say based on what you said because I'm responding to you.
Yeah, absolutely. And one thing that I think can be problematic, I don't want to generalize. A lot of times people generalize about the poker community. So this isn't all poker players, but there has been a latching on to self-development culture, self-development ethos, Tim Ferriss, podcasts, Naval Ravikant, and such like. And I know that a lot of people have found really important things for themselves to change and develop through that world. And there are a lot of good things from that. I think some of the ideas they have can be quite problematic. For instance, there's sometimes like a false interpersonal thing that you see with people where you can see that people have learned that they're supposed to have eye contact, shake your hand, ask how you're doing, but they're not very present. Like there's a big difference between learning the rituals to seem engaged and seem polite, and I know I'm quite privileged because this has come reasonably easy to me on my life, and for other people it's more of a challenge. But definitely, again, like genuinely being interested in people around you like brings a lot of rewards. One thing I always say about reading is it's not so much that I get understand everything about a culture from reading, but if you know a little bit, right, now you can ask a serious question.
The right
like
questions,
when I went to Czech Republic, I had a little bit of knowledge about the authors, about the history, and then okay, now if you know nothing about the Velvet Revolution,
it's
about
tough,
the form of color, you can be a bit clunky, or you might even be a bit rude. You might ask an insensitive question. Let's say, for instance, about the Troubles in Northern Ireland. You need to be very careful about the way you phrase a question and asking about very sensitive political questions. But if you know a bit and that person recognizes that it comes from a genuine interest, now it compounds on themselves, and now people will share stories about growing up in under communism in Czech Republic, or their memories of Václav Havel, or whatever it might be, or their memories of Northern Ireland, or their take on Irish history or whatever, and these, a little bit of knowledge can compound on itself. And as I said, like linking it back to what we're talking about playing live, just being at the poker table, I've made so many good friends from all backgrounds and all walks of life, just by chatting with people at the table and being friendly.
I like it. So this is a submitted question. I don't know what this is about, so you can pass or not. Okay, it sounds like you may have had a run-in with the law that led to a fairly interesting court case. Is that something you wish to discuss?
Yeah, I mean, it's quite funny because I actually didn't think I'd. Well, I talked about this once.
I don't know. I know nothing about this. So.
Well, I talked to. Yeah. I mean, I talked about this once, and it's on an interview which comes up quite early in the Google search, and I saw this interview, and I was like, oh yeah. And actually, I did a long interview with Busquet, which he never has edited and put up because he wants to redo the interview for his podcast, even though I did. And he listened to the podcast I'd done. I did. Again, I was so open when I was first a poker player that I mentioned it. I mean, I guess I could touch on it. I mean, I had been arrested a few times, and yeah, I was like I during the Iraq War, I broke into an American airbase and to peacefully disarm the US bombers, and I was arrested by soldiers, and I was on bail for 18 months facing those charges, and eventually the case was dropped. And yeah, like, I mean, that was obviously quite a crazy time in my life. And I was, I mean, one thing that's quite amazing looking back on it is there's a film that came out really recently with Keira Knightley. Maybe someone could Google it for me. And I watched it on a plane, and it's about her being a whistleblower in Iraq. Sorry, not in Iraq. She's a whistleblower, and she leaks to the press that the United States is pressurizing. It's based on a true story. She leaks to the press that the United States is pressurizing other countries to vote in favor of the war in the UN Security Council, and giving them financial incentives and such like. And so she goes to court on the and she pleads not guilty on the grounds that what America was doing is illegal and the war in Iraq is illegal. And she's sweating all the time whether her lawyers are sweating, whether weapons of mass destruction will be found, because it's not going to make people very sympathetic towards her.
It's called official secrets.
Official secrets, right. And anyway, her defense is that the war is illegal. And at the end, they drop the charges. She goes to court and they say, and the reason they don't want it is because they don't want the embarrassment of having her on trial and having her make the case that the war was illegal. And she hugs her lawyer and she's like really emotional. It's got this powerful music. And basically this is what I did, right? Like I had an amazing legal team who took my case for free, pro bono. I pleaded not guilty on the grounds that I was upholding international law. Like, you can commit a crime to prevent a greater crime. So you can kick in a door to put out a fire, and you can't be done for criminal damage for kicking in the door. And I used the same defense about my criminal damage and going equipped to cause criminal damage, which I was accused of. And mate, I can't tell you how embarrassing it is. I don't know whether I even wrote to the lawyers after I got off. Like, I was working I turned up a court. I remember my parents begging me to wear a shirt because I didn't want to wear a shirt for court. And they were like, you have to wear a shirt. And I was like, they're the oppressive state. I'm not wearing a shirt, and I got off, and then I just went away to Mexico, like a few weeks, I was like, on to the next thing. And actually, now I realize, now I'm older, obviously I think about my poor parents who, like, at the time I was like, well, whatever, they must have been so worried. And so, yeah, like that was a big deal. I don't like to talk about it too much just because I feel like, I don't know, I feel like I get a lot of credit for it, I guess, in that it sort of shows but I'm not, that's a long time ago, that was a long time ago. But, I was arrested subsequently, and I've been to court since, and I've never been found guilty of anything, so that's nice.
Okay.
But I definitely believe that you can break the laws of your country. Like, again, in terms of reading, at that time, in order to justify what I was doing, I read a lot about American imperialism, as I would term it then and would term it now, British colonialism, the history of people breaking the law of resistance, to illegal laws, in order to kind of morally give myself the strength to do it and to defend, to my parents, to my peers, what I'd done. Not that my parents, by the way, weren't very supportive; they were great with me. And yeah, it's something that now, looking back, almost as if that's a different person, I'm proud of that Sam Grafton, if you know what I mean.
I like it. All right, I'm going to give you 3 questions to close out from people that submitted the questions. I need rapid fire.
Sure.
Ready? Okay. With regards to studying away from the tables, how do you study opponents' deviations from GTO on the flop, and how best do you adapt your ranges to exploit those deviations and range imbalances on later streets with alternative lines, if possible, with mid-stakes in mind?
Yeah, I mean, I make a big note when people size up their very clear exploit you can make when people are only sizing up their big hands. When people are like sizing down their bluffs, you see that all the time. I know, like, even high stakes regs that do that don't roll the correct frequencies or don't,
Yeah.
And set up a server with your mates and all contribute a couple of hands, a couple of notes, and soon you'll get an impression on people that you play against regularly. I think that's very valuable.
I like that. Hi, Sam. From a winning mid-stakes player with limited experience, what would you recommend as the best way to improve after master classes and run it once videos? Getting expensive one-on-one coaching, database analysis, feel free to suggest someone, finding a network of peers to share hands and strategies, or working on my own with tools? Thanks.
Yeah, absolutely. So I still have coaching sessions booked with Ape Styles. I still have coaching sessions booked with my cash game. Like, as in, when it comes to the end, I just send the money. How much do you want for another 5? I have a cash game coach. When I come to the end of my cash, I haven't used him in 6 months. I haven't used Ape in 4 months. But when I go on a downswing, Ape, hey, come have a look. It's different paying someone to even having a friend look. A friend, you're just relying on them. They might soft play you. Pay someone at the next tier up from you to look at your thing. It is free money. It will pay for itself. By the way, it's like I steal the subjects in class. It's like a reverse scam. What happens when you get coaching from someone is they become invested in you. They become invested in your success. Ape Styles, mate, since then I've swapped with him in a bunch of MTTs. He always wins and pays me out. Like, I've got the money back off. Don't tell John, but it's a big scam. But I still have sessions with Elliot Rowe. Invest in yourself. That's absolutely important. Peers, of course, that's super important. One of the reasons I started coaching at BitB is to be in that network. I was happy to give them a discount on my rate to work with young, up and coming, eager pros who inspire me, who, someone like Pone Diddy. Alex, I met as he was back on now he's just as good, if not better than me. And I can draw on his experience and wisdom, and to work with European and think anything you can do to build networks, but don't sort of freeload. You have to bring something to the table yourself.
Yeah. And I guess if I had to add to that, I would say that I remember a long time ago, talking about these things with Phil, and that the takeaway was that all of those things should be done. You should watch videos, you should do a little bit of software, have friends, you should watch videos, and also most importantly, put in hands at the table. Sometimes people get carried away with some of the off the table stuff and they forget to play poker.
Yeah. I mean, just going back to Run It Once, sometimes people don't utilize the asking questions, right? You can feel a bit intimidated. Oh, this is Sam Greenwood. This is Sam. If you don't understand something, just ask a question. Having Sam Green, you can't pay Sam Greenwood for one-on-one coaching, but he tells you something, and then you can ask the exact reason, and he will give you a detailed answer, and it's free. And like, people don't realize your $100, you're entitled. We're paid to answer the questions. Ask those questions.
It's true. Okay. I'm sorry. Last one. How can we effectively use future game consideration, and how accurate is the ICM model in your opinion?
Yeah, this is really tough. Obviously, there are some notable high stakes pros who are deviating from ICM in the direction of calling off a bit more lighter because they feel that this big stack is going to compound on itself. I can see top level guys doing that. They may be proved wrong. There are some people that think they're just punting off money going against ICM. We see this when you watch the 25K replays, when you watch the 10K replays.
What is the main idea behind this question? Is it like deviating from ICM in that? Well, when a particular player, you decide to make a call or fold because this player is receiving those chips versus
So basically, the Monka solves, as I understand it, say, right, you can get in this range of hands against this shove. Right. Okay, you can reshove. When you get shoved on, you can call off this range of hands. And so you don't play directly for chips, because the chips won are not worth as much as the chips lost. But some people, if you win that flip and now you become the chip leader and that guy becomes the medium stack, you now get to open 60% of hands instead of opening 17% of hands. That next hand you can open 45% of hands rather than 10% of hands. Some people believe that now being the big stack will compound on itself. If we could run a simulation that took into account all the future hands at that final table, the one thing I take from the bit of doubt, the bit of ambiguity about how future game will affect me is when a spot is close. Let's suppose the stack sizes are, 80, 80, 20, 20, 20. When you're one of those 20 big blind stacks, those 320, when you double up to 40 big blinds, you're not going to have any more power at the table. You're going to be, if anything, more hamstrung in the hands you can open. There can't be any future game benefit to doubling from 20 to 40 when you're still going to be third of 5. Right, and still waiting to outlast those stacks. Particularly if, let's say, there was an 8 big blind stack. If it was 80, 80, 20, 20, and 5, going to 40 big blinds, you still be raising the button. The guy sets you all in, and you've got to fold ace jack. So we can see there couldn't be possibly any future game benefits. If there's a spot, let's say, on a final table bubble where you can move to chip leader, right, going into the final, that might be a spot where if it's close, let's say, obviously we have spots where we don't know the sim. You in the first instance that I gave, I would err on the side of caution. In the second one, I would err on the side of a call. And that's what I take from this ambiguity at the moment. And I'm paying close attention to some of these guys, Sam Greenwood, by the way, being one of them, who seem to be playing. Maybe they have a solver that we don't have access to. Maybe they have, this is the players that are doing it, I take seriously. But I also, by the way, just to give, because this is a very interesting topic of study, someone I take like Patrick Leonard, what he would say is at the moment, everyone plays slightly looser than the ICM model. People call off ace queen in spots they're not supposed to call off. People find it very difficult to fold the best hand. So people do call, and what he would say is actually because everyone is colliding more than they should, We should play tighter
okay.
than ICM, right?
Okay. Yeah.
If the bottom cutoff opens, you should fold because the button won't respect ICM and will raise call ace jack, even though they should raise fold. The small blind will, the big blind will call off against a small blind shove wider than they should because people don't like to fold king 10 suited when they know it's like ahead of the range. So, that's what means that poker is still alive and kicking, and MTTs is so exciting. We don't fully know how final tables. I know that was a long answer, but it is a very interesting area of study.
My favorite part of that, and something that I agree with, is you said basically that if you know somebody that's better than you and smarter than you, watch what they do and copy them. That's what I've learned from my
or at least start asking yourself the questions. I think it's
why they're doing it.
Yeah. When someone, there was that hand in the 1 mil final where Stevie Chidwick called off sevens against Bryn's King Jack, or he called off King Jack versus Bryn's sevens. And that was a clear, you can just run that spot and you could see that he's called looser than ICM. And I don't, you can just feel good about yourself. You can be like, haha, Stevie makes mistakes as well, or haha, like too rich, or whatever, right? Yeah. Or you can say, this guy is top of the game, he's studying, and he feels the model should be looser. What are the reasons? What would be the benefits, of that?
Yeah, the person that did that the most, at least in my experience, was Andrew Roble, 10 years ago, maybe 15 years ago. He would just watch people that were better and just ask those exact questions. Why is this guy doing it? And I guess things worked out well for him.
Absolutely. Also, by the way, we had a question about exploits. When you see someone who's winning who you don't think is good, there are players that have crushed this period of COVID who I can see so many leaks in. I think it's so bad. Okay, so what they're probably either by having worked it out or just by mistake, like their natural inclinations as a poker player exploit the player pool well. What are they doing? If they're c-betting too much, what does that say? Or what does that say about the player pool? Is the player pool doing really badly against overseas bet? Yeah. If they're calling off too lightly, if they're playing too tight on finals, if they're, whatever it might be, what spots are they taking? And then think about whether that's good.
I love it. All right, Sam, I feel like we're going to need you on the next month and the month after. I feel like we just scratched the surface. We didn't get to all of our questions. So we'll have you back in 2021. How about that?
Yeah, of course. It's always a pleasure to chat to you, Mikey. And thanks to everyone for their what is it? How do you manage your MT to prevent burnout? Yeah, I mean, I think we've covered most of this question.
And the other thing I'll say is that this is being recorded and will be posted on the site. So if anybody missed it, or if you want to revisit a certain answer, you'll have access to it.
Yeah, absolutely.
On the site.
No, thanks for you guys' attention. Really appreciate everyone that came, and thanks, Mikey. Always good to chat with you.
Likewise, really appreciate it. Sam, have a good day. Everybody else, thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next month. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.